Tonight's case begins with a marriage and a lie, not a little one, not one whispered behind curtains, but a God-sized lie, one that changed Olympus forever. This is the story of Trislanio, son of thunder, child of vengeance, accused of the unthinkable by a man who once loved his mother. Make sure you're tucked in. The wind is still, the night is long. Let's begin. Before Trislanio, there was Marielle and Florianio. They lived in a modest stone cottage carved into the cliffs of Thasos, where the ocean wind sang lullabies through the trees. Their lives were simple, peaceful, full of love, and full of promise. They had 2 children. Ariniamo, the eldest, was a blacksmith with calloused hands and a poetic heart. He forged more than tools. He sculpted thrones and ceremonial armor, pieces worthy of the gods themselves. Every evening he left a small iron sculpture at the edge of the cliff, a gift to Hephaestus, a quiet prayer of ambition. His sister Celiano was different. Her heart beat like a war drum. She trained with wooden swords in the courtyard, reciting the stories of Athena by memory, down to every troop movement of the Trojan War. Her bedroom wall was covered in hand-sketched battle maps. She prayed to Athena every dawn with a blade across her lap. And then there was Florianio, the father, a storyteller, a shapeshifter, a man who never stayed in one skin too long. He entertained the children with tales performed in the faces of their favorite heroes. He became lions, stags, sea serpents, and once a loaf of bread to make Celiano laugh through tears. But one night, Florianio left on a journey. He kissed Marielle, promised he'd return, and then he didn't. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still, no sign, until one night, long after the stars had risen. He came home, or so Marielle thought. He looked the same. He smelled like cedar wood and salt. He touched her hand just right, but it wasn't Florianio. It was Zeus, the king of the gods, and he wore another man's face. Zeus came to her not as thunder, but as memory. He knew every inside joke, every scar on Florianio's hands, every pattern in his beard, and Marielle, in her loneliness, believed it was him. That night, beneath the cliffs, she gave herself to her husband, or who she thought was her husband. 9 months later, Trislanio was born. He had the eyes of a storm cloud and the hush of thunder in his voice. But the day he was born, the sky over Thasos split in 2. The animals fled, and the ocean receded for 7 minutes. The gods said nothing, but someone else did. When Florianio came home 2 years later, he found his wife with a baby he didn't recognize. A baby who looked too much like him, and yet not at all. He listened to the story, and in his silence, something inside him cracked. He realized he had been impersonated, replaced, violated in a way no shapeshifter had ever experienced. But instead of mourning, he chose revenge, not against Zeus, but against Marielle and the boy. One morning, the door was open, the garden destroyed. A deer hung upside down from the rafters, its eyes replaced with river stones. A message, a warning. Marielle didn't hesitate. She packed what little they had, took Ariniamo, Celiano, and baby Trislanio, and fled across the Aegean. They arrived in Sparta, half-starved and trembling. There, the king offered them protection at a cost. They would become palace servants, forever beneath the heel of royalty, but alive and safe. Trislanio grew in the shadow of swords and embers. Ariniamo became the royal metalsmith, his fingers gold-flecked from morning to night. Celiano joined the Spartan Guard at 15, too young by any measure, but none could match her in strategy. And Trislanio, he wandered, watched, mimicked the birds, whispered to shadows. He didn't know who he was, but he knew. Something wasn't right. He didn't belong in the kitchens or the laundry hall. He belonged somewhere else, somewhere older, somewhere higher. On his 17th birthday, the sky cracked open again. Miles away, Athena was attacked near the marble steps of her archive. A blur, a hand, a blow. She caught only a flash of the assailant's face, but it was enough. She saw Trislanio, or someone wearing his face. Olympus erupted in fury. The son of Zeus, unacknowledged, unknown, was being charged with assaulting a goddess, and none could stop the trial. Imprisoned in a stone tower outside the gates of Olympus, Trislanio waited until Hermes visited him at midnight. He brought no food, no message, only a mirror. But this mirror reflected not one face, but many. Trislanio saw his own, then another version of himself, smiling with a cruelty he'd never known. And behind that, a third, Trislanio. The truth rushed in like a tide. He had been framed by the man who'd once held him as a baby, by the husband his mother still cried for in sleep. The gods watched from their thrones as Trislanio stood accused. Athena's face was unreadable. Zeus sat silent. And then, on the fourth day, Hera rose. She demanded proof, and proof arrived. A golden-winged dove flew into the courtroom, carrying a pendant from Sparta, a pendant blessed by Athena herself, worn by Trislanio. It shimmered, and from it emerged a memory. Trislanio shifting into Trislanio, walking into Athena's chambers, whispering the words she heard that night. It wasn't Trislanio. It never had been. Trislanio was cleared of all charges. Athena, for the first time in centuries, bowed her head. Zeus offered no apology, only silence. But Aphrodite approached him after the trial, not with pity, with awe. "You see what others can't," she said. "You know the pain of masks." The gods gave him a choice: fade into obscurity or rise. And so, Trislanio became a god. Not of war, not of thunder, but of shape-shifting justice. Of unsolved crimes, of truth hidden in lies. Trislanio didn't return to mortal life. He stayed on Olympus, but not as a courtly presence or a proud statue carved into marble halls. He stayed as a quiet force, a god without ceremony, without thunder, without glory. He built no temple, accepted no offerings. Instead, he walked the world unseen, solving the mysteries that the gods ignored, listening to the voiceless, righting the subtle wrongs that never made it into prophecy. When mortals cried out in silence, he was the one who answered. And when Aphrodite came to him, not with worship, but with curiosity, he let her stay. Their love wasn't grand, it was steady. Together they created Lycian, a child who could see into the deepest truths of the soul. And while the other gods bickered over wars, love, and power, Trislanio watched and protected. A god not of noise, but of knowing. A god who never left.